Welcome to Martial Wisdom. Here you can listen to conversations on all kinds of topics related to martial arts. The topic for today's episode is training Aikido for reality. Joining me for this discussion is Martyn Williams. Before we start, please consider supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Spirit Aikido online program, which currently has more than 160 videos. Another option is to contribute any amount you like through the PayPal tip jar. Even small contributions are greatly appreciated. I hope you enjoy this episode. Now, on with the discussion. All right, welcome Martyn Williams. He's from the UK. He's a police officer and an Aikidoka, an instructor. And I wanted to have him on today to talk about training Aikido for a reality. And he has a profession that he's actually used his Aikido as part of it as police officer, and has done some great innovations with taking his training and making sure that his Aikido is applicable. So I wanted to have him on the show today. Welcome, William. I'm sorry, welcome, Martyn Williams.
Welcome. Well, good to have you. Good to chat.
Yeah, excellent. We're gonna have a great time today, and I wanted to start this conversation out with covering the topic. I know a lot of people are in the camp of Aikido is not practical as a martial art. It's not applicable or something that can be used in real world situations. And it's not that we're here necessarily to convert people who think that way. I know a lot of people are kind of in the middle where they're curious about, yes, it should be practical, or I think it could be, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And I wanted to have this discussion to just throw some more things on the table for people to contemplate and think about. So maybe we could get started with your experience with seeing the applicability of Aikido with what you do as a police officer, whether it comes to taking people into custody or, apprehending them or calming a situation down, that sort of thing.
Yeah. As I said, probably the best way to describe it is we obviously have a officer safety training package, which is delivered in line with whichever force, country, and all that stuff. We'll have similar. So I imagine the States will have a similar thing there. And then more often than not, people will supplement that with their own training for their own interest. I mean, I do Aikido partly for the fun of it, as well as for me, always making sure I've got fitness and some capability skills to it. So that's part of the reason why I do it. In relation to how we use it, and again, that's probably my view there is, I think violence is on a sliding scale. That's how I view violence, from 1 to 10. 1 being, conflict where, you're stood with someone, they don't like you, they give you that dirty look, or they don't like your presence or wherever it is. And that's probably your start at 6, up to number 10, where someone's got you in full mount on the floor and they're chewing your face off in a horrifically violent capacity. So for me, I kind of look at violence from that 1 to 10, thinking, and in between that, you'll obviously have going up from pushing, grabbing, assaulting, punching, kicking, taking to the floor, and bottling you and that sort of stuff. So you've got like the sliding scale. And the vast majority of my work, we'll probably say, sits in the lower end. And this is also one of the big things around sort of self-defense martial arts, and especially those who are either police officers or door work or militaries. People often expect you, because you're going to be really good at self-defense, you're going to be really good, and actually one of the big misconceptions is when you work in one of those industries, police, fire, police, military, door work, actually that conflict has kind of got rules within it. You can't, as if one of those 3 people, you have got a mandate. So I do. If I have to use force, it's to achieve a lawful objective. It's to arrest someone, to prevent disorder. If I'm a doorman, and I've been a doorman as well, my use of force is to keep the club safe, keep the patrons safe, take the problem outside the club and eject onto the street. If you're a military person, you've got rules of engagement about what your use of force is. And I think what happens is people get drawn into the bad end of fighting. People train martial arts, people get used to it because they think, they're going to get into that scenario where it's going to go horribly wrong. There's 3 or 4 people fighting them, and you've got that horrifically violent encounter. Whereas the vast majority of encounters probably don't go that far. Most conflicts people have probably end up pushing, shoving, arguing, maybe the odd punch thrown, but it's rare it's going to go to that higher end level of violence. But a lot of martial arts and Aikido especially, everyone focuses on that real violent end,
Mhm.
where actually the vast bulk of your conflict will sit in that lower end violence. And that's why I think for me, Aikido is a really good benefit, because it works in that sort of preemptive situation where if you need to get control, you want to get that control quickly, so it prevents the and again, it's that, can I use the force that I need to do to prevent conflict getting higher? Because that should be the goal of definitely anyone law enforcement or door staff or something like that. But also morally, you kind of want to use the only force you need to do to achieve your objective. You don't want to go beyond that unless you have to. I think that's, for me, Aikido sits in that real low end, 1 to 4 on my violence scale. Aikido is a great art.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the rules of engagement thing, because I think most people understand that police officers have their rules, military have their rules. There's not as many, and then you have security people that have their rules, but every average citizen also has their rules. They just often don't even know that they have them. They tend to be in the mindset that I just have to leave, I have to run away, I have to flee, that's all there have. But regardless of what jurisdiction you're in, there are rules for what you can do to apply enough force to protect yourself, and obviously not more than that. And that's
and also, as instructors, we should kind of accept that, if you're teaching someone martial art, you should think, what do the laws of my land tell me to do? In America, you've obviously got firearms and concealed carry, and you can carry weapons that you can't in the UK and you can't in other countries. So actually, you should understand what your parameters you can work within are, because they will be different. And if you're teaching someone to be that martial artist who can break bones and eye gouge and whatever it is you teach, that's all very well, but you're imparting that knowledge into someone. You need to also make sure that they know when they can do that or when they can't do that, because otherwise you're setting them up to fail. I think it was Matt State talks about the 3 different fights. There's the pre-fight, you're all building up to it, the actual fight, and then the post-fight. Once it's done dusted, are you going to be in trouble with the police? Are you going to have a legal case against you? Have you hospitalised someone? You're going to have to live with that conscience of what you inflicted someone else. It's a bit like a dog's not just for Christmas; it's for life afterwards. It's the same thing here. Once you've had that conflict, it's not just going to drop away. You're going to walk away. You're going to question yourself. You're going to have your own mental. Did I do the right thing? Could I have done something different? Could I have done more? Could I have done less? Did I get injured? Should I have gone more aggressive? Should I be less aggressive? And actually, has my action prompted a worse reaction? Because we've all done that. We've all read situations wrong and gone, I've gone in a bit heavy-handed or a bit brazen, and as a result, it's gone horribly wrong. But also, get it right. I've not gone in, with enough presence, and it's escalated. Or had I come in with that higher show of force, I've probably ended the conflict much quicker. All valuable skills.
Sure. One thing that occurred to me in the preparation for this show is a concept that a martial art itself does not have virtue. It's the person that is the martial artist that has virtue or not, or the conscience or not. And I, for many discussions and arguments that I've seen about Aikido versus some other art, not from a physical standpoint, but from like a spiritual enlightenment standpoint, it really doesn't have anything to do with the techniques or how you would apply it. It's what the person does with it, and that's something that is unique to each martial artist. You can be a benevolent boxer or wrestler or any other artist. It's not the tools, it's how you use the tools. And I think when it comes to, people often think of, it's easy to think of martial arts and immediately put the template of fighting on top of it, because we see violence in movies, we see it in sport, and it's easy to think, well, what's the best and what's the most virtuous. And because we're not being like professional fighters, then we're obviously have some kind of virtue within our art. And I think that's a mistake, to try to attach your personal judgment and morals to a martial art. It's just how you use it. And I think, because I've met martial artists of every stripe that have high moral character, and they openly admit it, like, I'm not here to enact violence on somebody unless it's absolutely necessary, and I'm not going to go farther than I need to. So that's not a uniquely Aikido concept.
We were saying in the UK, I don't know if you've got it there, it's not the size of the dog it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is there are people who are incredible martial artists, massive presence, physical presence. You look at them and you think, oh God, I wouldn't want to rumble with them.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they might not have that capacity to deliver levels of violence that they need to do, and vice versa. I've worked doors many years ago, and I'll talk more about my door experience because I'm happy to talk definitely around that. Is one of my best mates was a small lad, much smaller than me. I'm 6'3", probably 100 kilos. Bit more flab than muscle these days, but still not horrific. And my smaller mate, he was always better at reading the situation. He'd be the first one into that conflict, usually the last one out. And it's that, he would just be more comfortable at moving into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also work with people who are, made me look small, and you could see that response wasn't quite there, that mindset. And it's something that I think is really hard to train, the mindset. Some people have it,
Mm-hmm.
some people don't. Can you develop it? Yes, you can. The military take people from, break them down and turn them into, killing machines on the other side. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but they do that. It can be done. They break a lot of people in that process. A lot of people, it isn't for them. They come out of the military, it's not for them. They have problems, they come out and they have problems afterwards from a lot of that, breaking down that character. So I think it cannot be overestimated. That's a really key part. But I think we talked about earlier, it's also the best thing that all these jobs can give you is, whether that's military, police, law, bounty, that sort of stuff. It's the confidence for me going through that fight-flight scenario. We all get it. Don't care who you are. If you get into a conflict now, anyone there, your body will kick in, your adrenaline will kick in, your natural reflexes, you cannot stop. Doesn't matter how many conflicts you've had, you will have that same process go through it. What I think exposure into those jobs or roles gives you is you get used to it. You can go through it quicker. It doesn't phase you as much when your legs start to shake a little bit because you're adrenaline. You start to feel like this is going to start going wrong. You can work through it because you've been there. That actually when I need to move, my adrenaline will take me to the right place. When I need to grab someone, I feel weak, but I'm not going to be weak. You get used to you acclimatise yourself to a level of conflict. I think that the problem is, the benefit is that brings you through that cycle so you can actually respond better. The people that respond well in conflict are the ones that can retain that element of thinking to think about what's coming next. Sure. Great military people, you watch the Navy SEALs and all that sort of stuff, is it's going horribly wrong around them. They've retained their formations, they've retained their training, they can still think about what they're doing and what they've got to do. That makes them great operators. Same with police, same with door staff. The ones who can retain that confidence and level-headedness will come out of conflict more often than not better than someone who, and you get people who goes, I just go berserk when I see red and that's it, I turn into a monster. Well, you might come out, you are not going to be as good as someone who can retain their thinking in that conflict. You might win a couple of fights, but you're not going to win them all. You're not going to come off as well as someone. And for me, that's probably a good benefit from martial arts is that can train you so that you get used to going out of your comfort zone and being okay with it. That will prepare you better. And that's probably the main benefit, as opposed to actually thinking, right, I've got a really good kotegeshi, and every time I think I've got the best kotegeshi in the world and I can dump someone on their ass every time I do it. That's a great skill. Being able to retain, being calm and actually manage your emotions, their emotions in conflict will be a far better skill than having a great technique that works every time.
That's a good point. I think, bridging the fear, we often see, within violence a lot of time in movies and TV where you have the hero who's totally confident, or even the villain, and they enact violence and they do it so calm and cool that you think, well, okay, must be how it goes, but it's not like that in the real world. Just like you described, there will always be the butterflies in your stomach. You'll always be managing a bit of the fear, and the thing with fear is it can totally immobilize you, and it can cripple your thinking. It can cripple your ability to move or to problem solve or all that. So
my first times, doorman, police, and stuff, you get to you're free. I said the first time I worked a door, it happened. I literally was having to say to myself, "You've got to go in." Literally, I'm literally almost out of body saying, "What are you doing?" It's go and help, go get stuck in. And it took 5-10 seconds for the body just to, to do it. That was fear. That was, you would not be a normal person if you didn't have that fear. If you've never had someone pick a fight with you and that sort of stuff. If you would, I bet I'd be more worried if someone didn't have that response.
Right. And I guess that bridges us into what you started to do to take this into your Aikido training. And
yeah,
I mean, for me, that dealing with the fear and being a little beyond your comfort zone is an important thing to do with training. And it starts out in very, very small doses. You can't just go into full bonzo. You have to start out with, just staying a little out of your comfort zone and getting a little bit of tension there. And sometimes even when you just want to work on specific practice with technique, is to imagine that fear. Like, imagine you have that inside your body feeling of that confrontation. And so what did you do to start? What was the beginning of your adventure down this road? Or your path?
And before I sound like I slate Aikido, I love Aikido. If I didn't like Aikido, I would keep doing it. Whilst I have some negatives, I think that so for me, the big thing about Aikido is I think Aikido is the foundations really well. A new student starts, you teach them to roll so they can not hurt themselves. You teach them basic principles, Taina Henko, how the body will react to certain movements. We go into paired kata. We build all the foundations of Aikido really well. Like most martial arts, no different to karate, no different to BJJ. I mean, I do BJJ and Aikido, my two arts I'm doing. It's no different to BJJ. I go to my club, they'll say, right, here's today's technique, we'll break it down, we'll learn it, we'll build on it. Mm-hmm. Aikido does all that, and it just kind of stops. For me there, it just goes, right, we're not really going to pressure test it. We're not going to, for me, if you need to have a technique that you can do under resistance, so actually when someone doesn't want to do that technique to them, and I don't just mean stood there being like, I'm not going to move. I mean, like, if I grabbed you, you would move and I'd respond to that. Instead of Aikido, we seem to grab someone, they move, and you just kind of stay feet rooted and, you bend around it. Whereas in real life, if I grabbed you and you took a step back, I'll probably just step forward with you. And we'd keep doing that until or if I grab you, I'm going to pull you to the wall or pull you to the, outside the club or to the toilet or whatever is going on. And we don't have that resistance element in Aikido. And then what we don't have as well is unpredictability. So that, even our piece of resistance, even our randori or ninadori sanburi, whatever you call it, which is kind of Aikido's, best pressure test or, what we aim for, the pinnacle of Aikido training, is still very organised. They keep the Aikido I do in my organisation. It's very much the attacks are all, they're set. I think it's either going to be a punch, shominuchi, yokomanuchi type attack, or maybe a grab. So I know there's a choice of 3 or 4 attacks coming in, and the sort of etiquette is, whilst there might be 3 people, yes, they will all take turns and attack, but you almost wait for that person the first attack to be being dealt with, and then you launch the second one. So I don't get 3 people closing me from 3 angles, all trying to strike me at the same time. I get one person. As I'm dealing with that, I know the second attack's on its way. So, but it's still an element of coordination. It's not as unpredictable. So what I wanted was, I need to bring in training that will increase resistance and will increase unpredictability, because that's what happens in the real world. You're going to get something you're not quite expecting, and you're going to do something that's probably not going to work, and you're going to need to be able to respond to it not working. Where do I go from that? So that in my head is where the gap was. And for me, there were 2 parts to it. One was the TEMI, and I'll cover that as a separate topic. And then secondly was just our basic training. I said most martial arts have a system where you go from, paired kata, learn technique, practice it, paired kata, and then some form of pressure testing, rolling in BJJ, sparring in boxing, whatever you want to call it, judo, match fighting, taekwondo, points fighting. Every martial art seems to have that element. We just
progression.
Don't have it.
Yeah.
So I literally just started the first. And again, what I'm probably going to do is I got a lot of it wrong. Like, we brought pads in. Some of the pressure testing we would do would be get like the big tie pads, and we would be just delivering, just literally raining down blows on each other and just trying to avoid stuff. I had little drill. We'd set up workstations, so like one person would, there'd be 4 of you in a queue. You'd all have a different role, different set of pads, different, whether it was like charging someone down with a big pad, and you'd all have a go in the middle, like having a little test that. And some of it worked, some of it didn't work, because we were doing like focus pads. Again, some people I trained with haven't done boxing or haven't done other martial arts, or haven't done striking arts in the past. So actually, it was very apparent striking was a big issue, that we weren't striking properly. Therefore, we're not going to be able to defend it if we're not doing it properly in the first place. Where I'm currently at is I've devised a little 5-step drill. One bit I've put on the internet in a video before. The rest of it I'll try and get filmed up. And it was, but step 1 was acclimatizing yourself to a little bit of violence. And it was someone grabs you, they can grab me any way they want. So it doesn't matter, cross hand, gyaku, I hand me, Mundadori, they grab however they want to grab. I let the grab settle, and my job is just to get out of it and get into a position where I can deliver a proper atemi and visualize the atemi. Because in Aikido, we do a lot of notional atemi. Someone will blend, and usually they'll come with the yokomen, you'll blend in, and they sort of put their yokomen strike back somewhere near their face and just stops. And again, I was a bit like, do this technique, getting close enough. If you're visualizing punching someone, place your hand right onto their nose and mentally visualize the damage that's going to do, because you need to kind of start thinking, actually, right, I'm close enough here. I'm gonna hit him in the nose, and his nose is going to splinter open. It's going to be blood and snot and everything there, and his head's going to go back. Get used to feeling and thinking what that's going to look like. So that was the first part of the drill. The second part was like doing grabs, but moving so that actually they're trying to grab me and I'm just not letting them grab, just move around. And it gets really chaotic. And the other thing about this, I don't think people like doing this in Aikido, is it doesn't look good. As soon as you start bringing in unpredictability and resistance, it looks crappy. It doesn't look that nice, because no one puts on a better demo than Aikido clubs. Christian Letitia puts on, the best martial art demonstration, with the exception of like the wushu fancy stuff. Aikido, I think, does the best demonstrations.
Oh,
no
yeah,
one likes
absolutely.
No one likes demonstrating where they look scrappy or it goes wrong, or you as a sensei don't get it right and get clumped, because that's part of what happens. No one does that. I think that lets us down.
Mm-hmm.
So the second drill was just keeping that. Third drill, get some focus mitts, getting used to just moving off, keeping your distance, and then when the mitts pop up, a couple of strikes, moving into a position where my big philosophy is you can't do Aikido until someone is off balance and you're on balance, they're off balance, and you've got some sort of slightly dominant position. So you're off to 45 degrees, you've got an arm drag, you've got an underhook, you've got a bit of a clinch on, you've got some form of control, they have lost a bit of control. Then your Aikido starts. If you don't get into that position, you can't do Aikido. So again, I was like, just a couple of things, bang a few pads, move in, get some sort of dominant position, and then break away. I then flipped it with, they would then start to put some MMA mitts on, throw a couple of attacks, and in the end, it was, I don't care what attack you throw, could be 2, could be 3, you throw the punches or blows, whatever you see fit. All I've got to do is not get hit. And again, do some stuff you've shown, like head covers, Wing Chun long blocks, whatever you want to do, tice the back your movements, you bring in your idea, just don't get hit, and then get yourself into a position where, again, I can start to try and control that person. And then the fifth stage, and the fifth one is where I haven't got it right yet, and I'm still looking to try and develop it, is bringing those in together. So actually what I do, I almost start with a judo hold with both you and Ukintori are trying to wrestle for position. So I get into that. Again, I'm trying to get into a dominant position, he's trying to get into a dominant position. We can move around, we can grab, we can pull each other around. I'd like to bring in some sort of low end attemis to it as well, so you can kind of hit. The idea being that, can I get into a sort of dominant position? And then, that's where, and for me, that builds on those basic skills of taking our Aikido techniques and getting into a position where we can start to apply them. And the first 4 stages we're kind of happy with. The 5th one, I'm still working on getting it right. I was looking at throwing in like shooting for legs and takedowns, because it's a valid, most fights end up on the ground at some point, either you, because you've had you've been knocked on your ass and you're on the ground, or you get lucky and you put someone on the ground. So again, it's not a bad place to think. Actually, it's not a scary place to go. And again, a lot like, I think it's from one of your videos from your early Spirit Aikido where you talk about the fight doesn't end when it lands on the floor. Actually, and I brought that into the training now, is Aikido doesn't work on, we don't finish in the pin, because pinning someone who doesn't want to be pinned is nigh on impossible. BJJ, the entire art is about making sure you don't get pinned on the floor. So, and I think a lot of Aikido people think, they'll do like an Ikkyo after put the Ikkyo pin, it's all nice and controlled. Just practice with your partner, right? Put me in an Ikkyo pin, I'm just not going to let you do it. I can guarantee you, most people will get out of it, but you won't get that pin on. So why are we focusing on Aikido and finishing that pin? Actually, so from your video, I brought that training in to say, right, okay, do a technique. The fight doesn't finish until that person's back up on their feet. So do an Ikkyo, put them on the floor, you back away as the attacker, stand over them, start looking, thinking, could I get a headshot in? Could I get one foot onto my head? Person on the floor, get into your back, get up. Once they're back on their feet, that technique's finished, because that's what you want to do in the real world. If I get put on my arse, my first job is to not get hurt, get my head covered, don't take any more damage, and then quickly get help to my feet so I can start addressing the problem. And why don't we train that in Aikido? It makes sense. Why do we finish letting ourselves be pinned compliantly, finish the technique, we were both back up, ready to go again?
Well, and that's, I think, part of taking on your training and turning it into a practice ritual. And it's a hyper focused practice ritual. And yes, it's fun to do. And you can, in that hyper focus, you can really get some reps and understanding of that fine 1 or 2 seconds between, point A and point B. But you're right, is what happens when C, D, E, and F, G happens. And as soon as you give your attacker license to say, keep going, if you can escape, if you can reverse, if you can get out of this, imagine like you have evil intent or intent, whatever intent it is, to keep going. You find out that a lot of the pins are problematic. It is not only difficult to set them up, even when you do the setup quite right, depending on the physiology of the person. I found a number of students and fellow students and my students that have got enough flexibility in their shoulders, they can roll out of an EKO pin. I've got one of my students, she's so small and wily, it's hard to get her pinned down. She's probably the most difficult person to pin in my dojo, and not because she's strong, but she's so flexible. And she's got a high strength to weight ratio because she's small, but she's physical and pretty strong. And, of all the people I know, including the bigger people, she'd be the last one I would want to try to have to pin down and hold and immobilize. But there's a few ways to do that.
But when do you want to find that out? Do you want to find that out in the dojo, or do you want to find it out when you, and there's,
right.
I had a friend many years at university. She's a really good martial artist. She'd never had conflict, she never had a fight, and we're out on a night out, and she got into it. She got into a fight with some girl. She'd done nothing wrong. It was just one of these people who just pick fights with people, and she lost. She was so disheartened because she just froze. All her training, none of her training worked. None of her training kicked in. What did kick in didn't really work because it'd never been pressure tested. And she came back. She never really came back properly, I'll be honest, after that. I think it kind of knocked her so much that she was just off course and never really. I don't think she ever had the mindset for violence, if that makes sense. And I think given her martial arts, given her a false confidence. But it's one of those things. When do you want to find out something doesn't work? Do you want to find out in a dojo with a friend who said, like, my mate Paddy, right, let's try this, Paddy. I'm going to put Kokish on you. I want you to get out of it. And you play around 5 minutes. If you're getting it 50 at a time, I say that's pretty good odds in the real world. I'll be happy to take any technique 50 at a time that works. But would I rather find out, actually, this just doesn't work for me doing it this way? I'd find that out in the dojo, because then I'm not going to bring that into the real world. And I think that's some of the videos I've come from myself. I've changed some of my techniques based on stuff I've seen, because I'm like, okay, Tristan does it this way. Let's have a play around with, I think, Katy can tell me where you cut the arm really tight into the body and all this stuff. So we played around with it, and actually my mate Paddy could escape from it. So I was like, right, let me try it this way, really tight, do something different with it, and it's a lot harder. So I'm like, okay, we've played around with it. I'll take that on board. And some stuff will work. Some stuff I play around and think actually doesn't really work for me. So I can play with it. But it's finding what works for you. Your Aikido, it's not my Aikido, and it won't be someone else's Aikido. You've got to find what will work for you, but find it out now. Don't find it out Friday night when somebody when there's really something there to lose. Trying to cut against someone, thinking, why am I getting punched in the face? Why isn't he on the floor? That's not when you want to find out that actually doesn't work for you that way. You've got to do something different. So that's my big thing. And again, that comes back to that. Have you got a bit of resistance in your training? Have you got a bit of unpredictability? If you've got those two things and you're starting to get results, you're probably in a good place. If you're trying techniques and you're never getting them to succeed, then you probably got to start looking actually at how am I doing the technique, or is it actually the technique that is a bit too complicated and probably doesn't need to be, Aikido, we all know small joint manipulation is quite fine skills. So actually can you do it under pressure? Can you do it whilst, you know, all else is going on? If you can't, then go to more gross skills. The Rimanagi, I'm sure you love a Rimanagi, especially as a tall guy like me. You know, everyone's perfectly face height and almost. So Rimanagi to me is a great technique. I'm sure you love it because of that. And it's simple. You know, the mechanics are, you know, you tip their head back, their balance goes, you point, you know, and then all you need is a bit of body weight goes through it. It's a very simple technique. It's a gross skill. It doesn't need. Yes, you can make it fine and beautiful, but as a rudimentary dirty technique, it works really well. So,
you know, along that path of exploration, which I was blessed to be able to start with, you know, about probably 10, 12 years ago or more, what I found is that certain techniques, I just label them as fussy. There's a lot of things to go wrong with them. I've found that every time you add another step, which is either a step with your foot or a turn or a body position or something that you need to get, or a grip or a hand position, every single one of those things is one thing that can go wrong. And you're right. I do like a Riminage. I like Sayunage, which is an Riminage technique. There's a couple that I just consider reliable go-tos that they're just not fussy. It's very easy to see that you're in a good position to do one. And it's basically one step and done thing, not, you know, playing with your food, as I'll sometimes refer to it. And it's good to practice the intricate and the more complicated to get a feel for it. But there are those things that your brain and your body easily trust. And there's stuff that in my mind that it's not very trustworthy. And I will say that and I've got a show coming up on this subject on the schedule, which is Koshinage. As a 6'4" guy, getting my center underneath somebody's hips and being stable and executing Koshinage when they're active and trying to avoid it is, in my opinion, is probably one of the fussiest Aikido techniques out there. Against a compliant cooperative uke, yeah, you can do it. It's still not pleasurable for me because I got to bend low enough to get underneath, but I can tell it was a technique that was invented by shorter people. But so it might not fit me very well, although there's another instructor here in the Twin Cities who's as tall as I am, and he does a fantastic Koshinage. You know, maybe it's one of those fits different personalities as well, you know, different body types as well as different personalities. But when I've tried it, I've kind of gotten it to work and can do it smoothly. The entry, you know, good portion of the time. I'd never trust it in live fire, because as soon as I tell Uke, all right, you're active and now you can do whatever you want to try to get out of this or counter it, and then it just turns into kind of a mess. And maybe that's just my personal experience. I know I've got a lot more to learn, but the setup is always
I think there's
intricate.
There's some classic techniques like, you know, but some of them, as you said, are very dojo based or limited in their window of application. Like what I talked about, I don't know in your service, it's Aikido. So you usually see it, someone comes in with a big showman, you sort of curl into a ball at their feet and they go flying over you. You know, looks fantastic in a demo, has a lot that can go horribly wrong with it. You know, at best, if you did someone on the street, they would probably just fall and collapse on top of you at best. You know, God forbid, you basically just give someone your back and you'll now, there's a lot. Now, I'm not saying it's not, you know, you never know, you might get an opportunity as someone presented, but you might get knocked on your back, and actually just by rolling into someone, kind of do an Aiki-Nagi sort of technique to some degree. So it's not without its merit, but it's not one, yeah, I'll happily play with it. And it's good. Again, don't think about Aikido is good fun. It's great fun barreling someone at full pace and then doing a nice big ukemi from it. You know, it looks great. It's fun. So, but train for what? My big thing Aikido is be honest about what we're training. If you're training that technique, it's mainly about fun in certain aspects. It's not necessarily something that I would ever say, like, take this, you know, you can use this in the outside world. And if people do that, I've got no issues. My big problem sometimes is when people try and dress up a pony to call it a racehorse. They sort of say, oh, this is, you know, this will save your life. And you're like, it's not going to work like that. You know, have you pressure tested it? Have you done something with it to really understand it? Because I don't think you have. That's where sometimes I think we let ourselves down in Aikido. People don't, whether they haven't. And there was a conversation with another Aikido group around, does Aikido attract certain types of people? And to some degree, I think it does. I think, you know, most people who take up Aikido either done other arts and are sort of potentially come to the twilight of their lives and decide they don't want to fight and get bashed up anymore. Some people don't like the idea of, rolling around, getting punched, kicked, bitten, leaving with injuries. Other martial arts. If you do MMA fighting, you're going to be more injured than you are from Aikido. Probably you're probably going to have black eyes. The potential for injuries there in all of them, but
yeah, there's not a lot of cauliflower ear people with in Aikido.
Yeah, but you go to any other, you go to Muay Thai, MMA, BJJ, even some of the Kyoshi karate stuff, you're going to get hurt and injured. And I think a lot of people don't like that, so they come to Aikido because that's that they can do their martial arts, but they're not going to get definitely injured over the top of it. So that attracts a certain type of people, but then also that mentality comes to the people who probably aren't going to push the extra mile when it goes horribly wrong.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mentioned the Temi earlier. I mean, my big bugbear with Aikido is a Temi. I do what we call notional Temi. What that means is everyone, and I speak to people and they go, "Oh, we do a Temi. Aikido is 9% of Temi, 10% of Temi. It changes on a daily basis." And we don't say to people, "Okay, when you mean you do a Temi, do you practice hitting pads and people? Because if you don't, you're not doing a Temi."
Right.
And the simplest thing I could say, and if anyone is thinking, what kind of make Aikido better, is invest in a set of £10 focus mitts. Even if you want to stay within mainstream Aikido techniques, actually practice doing yokomunuchi attacks against the pad. So you're stepping in, hitting a pad, and actually getting used to hitting. Because it's all very well doing a notional thing. You need to hit someone with precision, pace, and power. Otherwise, you're not going to do any damage. If you're not practicing that, if you're not doing that, you're not going to do it for it. If you only ever throw a notional Temi and stop short, you're never going to hit someone for real. You're never going to be better in the real world than you are in the gym. So why don't, even if you want to stay in that Aikido world, practice your shomunuchis on pads. Get used to thinking, actually, if I hit someone, it jars my body. I'm not going to be that nice, elegant blend. If you're actually laying a yokomunuchi back in someone's face, it's going to jar your body. It's going to disrupt how you react by hitting someone. So if you don't practice that, you're not going to know what it feels like. Then bring that back into your world. So when if someone does a shiranagi from Yokomen, the Aikikai, the gold standard thing is you sort of blend, select the hand, go into a nice shiranagi move. Actually get used to blending and hitting that person with a bit of pad, because you'll find their body will react and move differently because you've hit them, or you've caused them to have a impetus of force. Your body reacts like differently. So you might find that it's hard to get that technique on. We just don't do enough of it in Aikido. You get people go, "Oh, we do a Temi." What they mean is they do really large shouting kiais, and they're it's hard and it's fast, but they're still not hitting people, getting used to hitting something. It's weird. If you've never hit someone, it's actually really hard to do. I remember grading my sort of Chinese martial arts stuff. The first time we did it, I actually got pulled out of the grading because I wasn't hitting the bloke. I like the bloke. I found it really hard to bare knuckle punch him in the face, because if you missed, you got a full pelt punch in the face. I was pulling my punches because it was really hard for me to switch on that mindset and go, no, it's his benefit. He's volunteered to the grading. If I hit him, it was a really hard thing to do. Second time I did a grading, I managed to find that switch and turn off and was able to hit the person with no issues. But it's hard to do that. If you've never practiced hitting a pad, you're not going to suddenly turn out Friday night and deliver someone an Temi that knocks them flying. You're not going to do it. So why aren't we doing more Temi training like that?
It's funny you mentioned that, because along the road, I find that students, because you're right, martial arts attract certain types of people. I have found that my dojo attracts usually, I guess you'd say, pretty nice people that want to learn martial arts, but they're not in the I want to hurt people. They don't attract that type of folk. What I've found is a challenge is getting people over the shyness of even just putting their hands on somebody, because civilized people are like, you don't touch somebody, much less put your hand in their face or, things like that. And a Temi work exactly the same way. It's easy for us to, watch movies and see somebody, a fist land, and then the person goes flying backwards, and you think, oh my God, if I hit somebody with a fist, that's going to happen. It's like, no, not even close. In fact, just last night we were working on punching mechanics and whatnot, because I think it's important for every martial artist to know how to hit hard. Like that's just period. If you don't know how to hit hard, you're not a martial artist. I hate to say it. I don't know what you're doing, but it's not the thing. You need to know. And so we were working on this, and I've got a couple of new students, and I focused them rather than hitting the face, because that's even more out of bounds than the body. We started with pads, delivering the hip mechanic, and we're working on the double hip and things like that. And I said, all right, now we're working for power to get the good mechanic. Now we're going to go for targeting, and we're going to hit each other basically just right in the stomach. And, we're just stay away from the solar plexus. We don't want to knock anybody's wind out or anything, but just right in the belly, and with the penetration to actually take posture, because that's going to be, you want to fold somebody, so you're going to drive through. So you're not just aiming to get that impact, you're going through the stomach. And we had to work on it for half an hour to get people to actually go past the gi into the skin and past into the, stomach towards the spine. And there was so much shyness. Oh, I don't want to hurt them. I'm like, no, you're not going to hurt them. You're just going to fold them. And it takes a while, and it's not the physical, it's more the mental. Like, I'm going to impose on you, and I'm going to take your posture. And it's like, this is how, to me, Atemi works, is you use that motion to take the posture, not because you want to cause harm and damage. That's what it's there to do. And the other one I found that takes a great bit of training to overcome that mental shyness is shomanate, is having their hand come up in somebody's face and just move their head. It will take me a couple of weeks to get a normal, nice person over over the repulsion of actually touching somebody else's face. And, there's some good mind lessons that come in there of, if somebody's going to enact violence on you, they don't have any hesitation about putting their hands on you. So realize that in the situation you are, the rules have now changed. You're no longer dealing with a civilized person. You're now dealing with someone who has no regard for your safety. And this is where that switch, like you said, has to go on. Or you could say, I take my civilization switch and just switch it off for a second. Like, I need to control you. But yeah, it's I'd say 90% in the mind versus in the body. And that's what the training has to cover.
Yeah. I was exactly, train hard, play easy, fight easy, isn't it? That sort of thing. If you don't experience it in training, you're not going to magically do it in the real world. That's why, that's the key thing for me. If you've never hit a pad, you're not going to, if you've always pulled your punches short, on the day you need it, you're not suddenly going to deliver the punch, drives all the way through, does, if you don't train it, you won't do it. Chances are you won't do it to the level you train it at. You'll never, I said, you'll never be as good in the real world as you are in the gym. But if you don't progress to those stages, you can't expect yourself to suddenly perform on the day. Right. No one does that. So it's.
And as we were recovering it last night too, I made sure to say, if you're the uke, if you're the one that's taking the punch to the belly, for one thing, you're not just a punching dummy. You're starting to learn what it's like to be punched and to realize it's not that big of a deal, because, seeing that in a movie, that punch that sends somebody across the room, and you realize, man, if I get punched, I'm going to get blasted. It's like, punches don't quite work like that. I mean, unless you're Mike Tyson or so, you're some, like a real boxer can hit like a freight train, but most people can't. That takes an extraordinary amount of training to have that level of punching power. But it also is a bit of a body hardening, even, and I have them hold like a punching shield against their body so they can feel the penetration going in, because that's an old school body hardening method. So you start to build up the muscles, they get used to impact, and you realize, I can take a shot. It's not a big deal. And that builds up the mind part, realizing that your mind doesn't totally crumble when somebody lays a shot on you. And the more you get used to it, it's not a big deal. But it's funny seeing the initial reaction of, oh my gosh, I'm going to get punched. And we got a brand new student, and when his partner would come in to start the punch, he'd start folding up before the punch even got there. It's like, no, just stand there. Don't be afraid of it, and so it won't hurt.
I sort of come full circle about, that confidence in, again, even if you get, like I said, just the big pads, like the old Thai pads on, you just start battering. If you could do that, and actually, the first time you do it, someone who's never done it before will probably find it a really horrible, dark situation. But once they've done it once or twice, and they come out and think, actually, I've survived that. Actually, I didn't take that many blows to the head, and even the ones I took, I shrugged off. Brilliant. And then, of course, the next time, as you said, you can't just throw them into a shark tank straight away and say, right, your first night on session, everyone's going to back to you, because they'll never come back, and you'll destroy any confidence. You build that confidence up, but you've got to build it, get it wrong a little bit, and think, well, actually, I survived that. I was, I did a video with Matt Stay. I went to see him, and we put gloves on, and he was a bit like, right, I'm going to throw punches at you. You can kind of do your Aikido moves and long blocks to see how many you block. And I'll be quite honest, he was hitting me 78% of the time. And then, of course, he's like, right, let's do some, tighter covering up and just more practical stuff. And I think I had the gloves on, I was hitting him, and I was hitting him 20% of the time. So it was very much a case of there's nothing wrong with getting it wrong, and actually go, right, okay, let's try something. Right, it's not quite working, because you'll learn from that. And again, as long as it's not done in case of, he wasn't going 100% power and knocking my head off. He was just proving the point that he could go that level distance, And same thing, it's that taking that step, which Aikido seems to stop at the moment. It's taking that next step. Right, okay, let's just add that complexity to it. Let's just, and I'm not saying do we want full competition Aikido? No, I don't think we should go down the competition route. Do we want full-on pressure? Do we want full-on sparring with, all that stuff on? There's some benefit to it, but I don't necessarily think it. But we need to have something. We need to have something that says, right, okay, at a certain level, you should be able to, at a mid-level orange belt, green belt, something like that, you should be able to deal with someone coming in, sticking some random attacks at you, and you should be able to get a position where you can kind of get some control on it. We need to have that ability to, and as you get better, that ability should increase as well. As a Shodan or Nidan or something like that, you should be able to actually, I can get to that position much quicker, or I'm going to take less damage in than someone who's only a lower grade. You can build that level of confidence, continually push someone just slightly outside their comfort zone, let them come back in, and then keep pushing it, and then just keep moving the goalpost of where that comfort zone is. And I don't propose to end up with a full-on sparring Aikido, because it would be very weird. But we haven't got anything in between at the moment. The nearest we've got is our Randori. Sure. And I don't think that, whilst it's got some great, I don't quite think it's what we're looking for. It's not what I'm looking for, because it's not. I'm not going to be stood there with three people. The reality is, don't know how good at martial arts are. If you've got three people taking you on, your chances of success are slim. Even if you're a very good martial artist. And my view of martial arts is that you're looking at your balancing the odds of the fight. If I'm in a conflict, I'm starting at 50-50. 50% chance I might win, 50% chance my partner can come off better. What can I do to just tip the odds in my favour slightly? Well, been out doing some sort of CrossFit training today, so trying to keep my fitness up. Mentally, what have I done to prepare my mental state to keep myself slightly better? My physical skills, my Aikido control skills. I'm tipping that balance of that odds that I'm going to hopefully come off better than my opponent. I'm never going to win all the time. There'll be people that better than me. Their luck is a big thing. You can't predict luck, on a better word. You cannot win every conflict. All you can do is improve your odds that hopefully will come out better than if you hadn't done anything. And that's kind of the best
one thing that I wanted to toss in there, and this is just kind of a half point back, which was you talked about the full 100% intensity sparring type pressure test, I guess you'd call it, or call it a competition. And what I found that with the head covers and bringing elbows up, what I've found that tends to discourage full on attacks. Even as we started increasing intensity 60, 70, 80% or more, those elbows tend to find fists pretty quick and biceps. And it can actually, when you take on dealing with those attacks and protecting yourself, you're kind of like a porcupine, that a full on heavy duty, full intensity attack can actually harm the attacker. And that's kind of to me, it's a feature, not a bug. In the fact that, if somebody really was trying to take your head off, you'd cover your head, but they might hit their hand and bust their hand, or, you impale their bicep or shoulder with your elbow. And even with the frame of somebody who's charging into a tackle, they're running their neck into your forearm. And I've got my most durable student. He's a retired firefighter now, but he's like a bulldog, big, strong. And even he said, I this is about as much as I want to attack, because that clavicle in the neck, you run right into that forearm, that hurts. And, when it comes time for, okay, this is a big question I'm sure every martial artist asks, and I know a lot of Aikidoists ask, is, can I handle that 100% intensity attack? Well, you get there by going, can you successfully deal with a 20% attack? And then can you deal with a 40% and then a 60%? And if it starts crumbling at 40, 60%, 80 to 100% is not going to work. But as you start getting to the point where your attacker says, I don't even want to attack you any more rigorously, because this is an unpleasant experience. And that's just you protecting yourself. It's not you actually going to try to cause them harm. You're getting off the line and putting up a head cover, and they run into it. To me, that's one of those, it's a real world benefit in those two ways. Because, having somebody slug you and hit an elbow and their hand hurts, maybe that shifts their mind and says, you know what, this is about as far as I want this to go. And maybe that's where they back off and leave. And you didn't have to give them a throat punch or poke them in the eye or kick them in the nuts or anything like that to get them to back off. And that mind part, and this is why I wanted to bring this up as well, is that the mindset of your attacker is the hardest thing to simulate in the dojo. Like it's in fact, I think, impossible. You can kind of get close if you got somebody who's got a little bit of acting ability, but we just cannot fully simulate a real attack situation in a controlled environment, because the student knows I've got my gi on, I know where there's pads all over the place, or I know I'm in a safe place here in the dojo. Whereas you're out in the real world, your brain just goes, anything can happen, and there's a difference there. And I don't think we can ever bridge that difference.
No, and I don't think you will. So the only way of doing it would be to bring someone in, like who's the pub across the way, give someone 10 quid to go in the pub, and I don't think you're right. I think you can never recreate. And also, there's so many variables and situations. You can you could go, right, let's go to, we've done it. We went to the local pub and did a little bit of filming one night and kind of said, right, but you can never recreate how the fights are going to happen. I mean,
right.
The last time I had an argument with someone, it was a road rage incident, and I always said to myself, if I'm in a car and I get what I don't want to be is sat in the car, my window down, and then outside the window, because that's a really bad place. I'm seated, the window's open. They've got, it's not a great place to start a conflict off. Mm-hmm. So would I? The reality is, if I'm getting to a road rage incident, do I either stay in the car, keep the windows up, because I've seen people do it, it's quite hard to smash your way through a window unless you've got some sort of implement. Punching a window is going to break my hand fairly quickly. Mm-hmm. Or I'm out. I'm one or the other. I'm either out of the car, so we're on level playing field, or we're in the car and I'm wearing windows up and I'm just going to ignore it and drive off, or whatever I choose to do. Mm-hmm. And that's in my head. That's what I'm always prepared for. And of course, what happened? We came to a set of traffic lights. Bloke ran out. I assumed he was lost and wanted directions. Of course, I wound my window down, saying, "Are you lost?" To which I get responsive, "I don't like your automatic headlights that keep going full beam, because it's got like automatic headlights to decide." And obviously, every time we go around the corner, it went full beam, came back round behind him, went to low beam again, and it suddenly started into an argument. And I was suddenly very conscious of, I'm in the one place I said to myself I didn't want to be, which was sat in my car, seatbelt on, sat thinking he's now stood free rein to start wading through the window if he wanted. So of course, what I had to do was, right, in my head, I apply what I call the MDM, minimise the damage I'm going to get, disrupt the person, and if I have to, maximise the damage I'm going to inflict. I don't mean that going to like the eye straight to the arrow code. I mean a quick technique that's the quickest technique that can get me extracted. So it might be a push and run. It could be something more than that, but it's what's going to be quick and easy to finish it. And in that situation, you're so stacked against me. As much as I didn't like it, I had to be fairly respectful. I'm really sorry about the lights. I'll turn them off. Because what I didn't want to do is, I was starting on the back foot. So actually, how am I going to minimise the damage? Or actually, I don't want this to become a conflict. I'm going to have to, potentially give in more than I would like. Be a bit more apologetic, be a bit more humble than I should. I had no right. I didn't have to do anything like that. I'd done nothing wrong. But if I was arrogant and ego and said no, jog on, it becomes a conflict. I'm in a bad place, so you've got to assess every situation.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for me, that comes back to that calm mindset of, right, I'm in a bad place. How do I extract myself from it?
Mm-hmm.
Other people might just have frozen. Other people might have started arguing, trying to get their seatbelt off so they can get out of the car. And of course, you're not going to win that conflict. He's going to keep the door shut and start raining punches at me. I'm not going to be able to deal with that. So again, it's that calm mindset of, right, the conflict's happening. What's my best route out of this one? And go from there. And I think again,
like it's impossible to simulate the full level 10 violence realistically. The setup is also something that's almost impossible to simulate. And I've worked with law enforcement officers that have done that scenario training, and they can get kind of close. But even then, there are so many indications that you won't have in a dojo environment that you will have in a real world, that tell you, your instincts tell you, like, what is this person's intent, and reading them. But those things are not accurate when you are dealing with your trainer or a coach or somebody like that. Like I said, you can kind of get close, but all the things that you need to make your judgment of, okay, what is this situation? Like you were in a car, you were able to read somebody, but if you and I were training and we tried to role play that and we went out on the street, it just would be totally fake. So therefore you question your judgment. So the training itself like that can only have a limited amount of effect. I mean, it does in terms of, like, did you abide by your rules of engagement if you have them as a police officer or whatever your rules of engagement are? And I've done them. They can be informative and kind of helpful, but you can't really make a martial art out of that aspect of the negotiation and the judgment and the problem solving and the creative thinking. And really there's no substitute for real experience when it comes to that.
No, but again, I suppose the difference is at least try and address it, because if you don't try,
right? Absolutely.
There are, does Aikido have the answer to someone who's a BJJ guy taking you down? The answer is probably not, but doesn't mean to say we shouldn't ask a question, and doesn't mean to say we shouldn't try and answer. Because if you just ignore it, well, then you're never going to have an answer. At least if you try or think about it or explore options, you're at least looking to try and And I said, you won't get it right. None of us will get it right. Some of us, I said, when I started to bring in these, elements training, I've got as much wrong as I've got right. Trying to bring my, when I first started throwing punches, it was very apparent. I was like, some of these people have never thrown punches in their life. We can't start going to drills where you're looking to preemptive attendees, move into the control position, because we've never even done proper attendee. So we need to go back to the basics for that.
Sure.
I'm not a boxing coach. I boxed many years ago, but I'm not. It's been 20 years since I've put gloves on properly, actually physically. So I'm rusty, and I'm not. Am I qualified to coach something like that? Well, actually, not massively. Hence, so if I do it, am I going to do it badly enough? And again, it's exploring stuff like that. So it's not. But I'd rather ask those questions and try than just sit back in the sand and go, right, I'll tell you what, we do proper attending Aikido. Let's just leave it at that and crack on the bliss. Take the old matrix, take the red pill, blue pill, and just be blissfully ignorant as to what.
Well, I think there's a way to fit those things in to make students aware of them, but without saying, we're not specializing on the training of de-escalation, because if you really wanted to be good at the negotiation part, that de-escalation part, that's what you want to practice several hours a week. To say, that's something that's very difficult to train. But here are the tools that you would use for de-escalation. And that to me is what bridges into the physical part, because, and I'm sure you've seen this as a police officer, is the body language that you convey leads into the positioning that you want to start to veer to a superior position if you realize that this is goes physical. And that might be a choice made by the other person, not made by you. In your case, as a police officer, it might be made by you. You have more latitude to take somebody into custody than an average citizen does generally. But that's where, you stay with the verbal exchange level, but you're setting up, well, if this goes south, I want to make sure I'm in a position where I can quickly apprehend and control this person. And that's
it comes with experience. Like I said back to the start, is the good things about whilst I don't think law enforcement, military barracks automatically make good self,
Right.
you don't become an automatic, just because you do one of those, you're not automatically great at self-defense, you're not automatically great at martial arts. A great martial artist doesn't make a great self-defense practitioner. A great self-defense practitioner wouldn't necessarily make a great martial artist or law enforcement, but they hand in hand. What I would gain from that is, you get used to reading body. If your job is, you're always reading, you get better at picking up signals. I was probably better as a doorman because that was very much the job. You were for very, for 2-3 hours. My job was to watch everyone in that nightclub pick up on the cues. Other roles, law enforcement, you're not always doing that. You do it quickly for that situation when it's just going wrong, and then you're back in the car driving to the next job. Dealing with you're not always at that level of intensity. Door work is probably the one for actually, if you want to get exposure, it's probably the best one, because for that 3-hour period, your job is to monitor everyone that's coming past you and thinking, right, picking up on their cues, picking up on that stuff. And
you learn the art of profiling, and that has to be done in a real world environment.
And there's, and you get better at it, and you get it wrong. You get it wrong. I got it towards the end. You get it more right than wrong, but you still get it wrong. And I think there's something Batari's box that we talked about before. That's my behaviour would indicate what, if I walked in and was very arrogant and bolshy and aggressive, that will automatically would start indicating how you're going to respond to me. And of course, then that will feed me as to how I respond to that. And it is accurate. And to some degree, I can't control how you're going to react to me, but I can control how I'm going to present to you. It's probably the best thing. And that's that hump, and there are times where you think, actually, I need to be, that assertive, walk in, right, I'm in charge, this is how it's going to go down, and that will make everyone listen to you. There's times you went in with that same approach, you just lit the fuse, and it's going to blow up, and actually what you need to do is come in and go, right, tell you what, back to my car scenario, when I'm sat in the car, I've got 2 choices. If I go, listen, mate, get back in your car, shut up, it's nothing to do with you, that's probably going to, my gut feeling was that would probably lit the keg and I'd have ended up in a worse situation. Even though I'd done nothing wrong, it was better for me to, I think, actually, okay, look, really sorry, I'll turn the lights down. I didn't realise it was doing it. Take that humble approach.
Right.
I read that as a better way of not ending up in that conflict. And it worked. He dropped his guns a little bit about something and stormed back into his car and drove off. So I chalk that as a win. Some people will go, oh, well, you back down, all that sort of stuff.
Well, and that's the thing. If you put the template of a fighter or a fighting mindset to that situation, you're right. That would have gone in not a good way. But the idea that you can handle a physical situation is not that you have a fighter mind inside of you that you just unleash on somebody. It is all right, I'll try to get this situation resolved without there being a physical conflict. But to be ready for if it does happen to that, because you've dealt with irrational people. A lot of civilized people never have, and they can be, whether they're drunk and belligerent or just sober and belligerent or whatever. They can decide, I don't care what you hear, what you tell me, I don't care what you say, I'm angry and I'm going to go physical. They can make that decision, and that's an important.
The other thing to talk about training is you think on those. I'm fairly confident we can all say we've had a drink, and we've all probably been a bit of an arse when we've had a drink. I know I've done it. I'd be amazed when anyone says no. I'm always, if you've had a bad day, you get drunk, it will bring out the bad side to you. We've all been there, and it's that sort of thing of remembering. And something we do in Aikido, I've tried to bring in a little bit, is think about how you practice your visualize your attack on someone. Because if you can visualize what you would do, and like we did the bar training, it was very much like, right, you stand at the bar, right, all take a turn. How, if you were going to attack that person, how would you do it? Because we all probably do it slightly differently. I might approach you from the back, the behind side, stamp on the back of your legs to drop you down and then start going down on you. Someone else might walk straight into your face and just go straight to your head. But we would all have a different approach. If you can think about how you'd approach a problem as an attacker, that kind of helps you then also think, okay, how will I then counter that if I think about it as a defender? No one is going to walk up to the street, just grab you across the body, just stand there and hold you, which is what our knives and Aikido attacks tend to start from, like a high hand grab, something like that. Think about, okay, if I was going to grab someone, would I just grab their wrist and hold them? No, I wouldn't. chances are I'm probably going to grab them much higher up, and I'm either going to push or pull and get my head nice and close so that they can't. That's how I would probably grab someone. So actually, let's think about that. Right? Let's think about that grab and think
in a way that has that intent included in it.
Yeah. But if you can think a little bit like you're the attacker. And I said, like a car, it'd be a great one. We didn't do it. I probably might revisit it. So they'll get on my shoes. Right, okay, let's sit on a chair. You're in the car, windows open. How would you attack? How would you attack them? Because if someone might go, I'm just going to throw punches in. All right, okay, fine. I might reach in and grab him by the face. Okay, yeah. There's only limited ways of doing it, but if everyone said they do the same thing, and again, you're looking for that reality one is train for what is kind of realistic. If you're training for 3 ninjas jumping out of you and attacking you, A, you're probably going to not succeed anyway, but B, that's 1%. That's not even 1%. That's so unlikely to happen. Why worry about that? Train for that level of 1 to 3 level of violence, because that's more than likely where you're going to get conflict. I'm a middle-aged man now with wife and kids. I don't go out drinking. For me, I can't remember the last time I went out on the Friday night drinking till 2 in the morning, dancing, layering it up. I'm more likely to get into conflict at the local supermarket. I steal someone's parking spot, he steals mine, and we end up in an argument. That's the argument I'm going to get into, not 2 o'clock in the morning.
Not a gang fight.
Yeah, you get people doing like nice stuff. We're quite lucky in the UK. Firearms are really, not that common. For you, as unless you're involved in a criminal lifestyle, you're probably not going to come into contact with anyone with a firearm. So you could do training on it, but you're kind of wasting your time because you're really not going to get involved in it. States might be slightly different. People have more firearms. You might need uniform training. Knives, again, as much as there'll be a lot of knife crime, most people are not going to come across knife crime if you're, especially if you're an Aikido who's a middle-aged person. You're not going to get. If you live in a city and it's really rough and people are getting stabbed, then you want to kind of bring elements of where you live and what your exposure is going to be into what you train. If you're a doorman, you probably want to think about actually my biggest goal is can I restrain someone taking from A to B, because that's my job going to be. If there's a fight, my job is to go and break the fight up, extract the problem, and extract it from my club. So you kind of need to focus your training on what you need it to do. It's not John Wick.
From a history of martial arts standpoint, when a culture had an influence from another culture, usually that other group of people was invading, and they would run across one another, each of their martial arts would change and adjust to one another, because it would say, all right, my martial art needs to be able to handle this particular threat. And I've got a great respect for the Filipino martial arts, because they were invaded by a lot of different other cultures throughout the centuries, and their martial art was exposed to a lot, and it had a great deal of utility because it refined itself to deal with all manners of attacks. So to me, that's how I view that a martial art is a living thing. And just like you've taken your training and adjusted it to the type of application that you need. And I think that Aikido has the room for adjustments to be made for how people want to use it, what they think, it's going to be, what they need it for. I think as martial arts get more solidified into it, here's exactly what it is, and it's not anything else. The more it's limited that way, it becomes inflexible. It's like a glass rod. You can, if you try to bend it, it just shatters. But a martial art really needs to be a living thing that will adapt, and it will, it can shift and do different things without losing its soul. And I think that so many people will say of Aikido, it talks to me, it appeals to me in a way that I can't really describe, but I really like what its spirit and its soul is. And I feel that way about it too. But I don't feel like it's a glass rod that is limited to, one particular thing. And if you try to adjust it at all, it just totally falls apart. I think that it is a martial art and it is a living thing, and it can evolve, and it should evolve.
There's nothing wrong with the tradition. There's nothing wrong. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of the magic, no touch spirit stuff. But I've got nothing wrong with traditional Aikido. People say, no, this is what we're doing. Like, there's a rigid structure to it, and I enjoy that. There's nothing wrong with it, but also there's nothing wrong with making it personalized and taking a step to evolve it. And I think that's the other problem I can't face Aikido is I think there's a lot of people resistant to doing something that's not, you hear that's not Aikido quite a lot. I know in the Aikido martial arts way web pages are involved with quite often, people don't find more, the mainstream pages are much bigger and grow much faster because that's what people want, and it's fine. But both worlds can exist as long as you're honest about, if someone said to me, I do pure XY Aikido, this is what I do, and this is why I do it, I've always done it this way, and as long as they're honest and not trying to sell something to other people, I don't have an issue with that. It's when people come along being like, this will save your life, this will work in the real world, you just got to train harder, faster, the magic will come to you when you're 10 years in. It's like, hang on a minute. I don't think you've generally I don't think you've generally quantified that with some evidence behind it. I think you're just kind of start that. That's when I start to, and it's not just like all martial arts. The Chinese martial arts are the same. Well, so many other arts have kind of fall behind that. We just train harder, longer, faster, and the magic will happen in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. And for me, there's nothing wrong with Aikido at all. Aikido doesn't need to change how it starts. It just needs to, for me, for what I want from it, it just needs to add a little bit onto the end, as opposed to. But people don't want to do that. That's fine. There's no. I'm not saying the organisation needs to be pulled apart. We need to restructure Aikido and change everything. We don't. It's great the way it is, but can we bolt something? Can we bolt a few things on it that might make it explore being a bit different? I don't think that's the wrong thing to do. I think the wrong thing is to limit it to say, no, you can't do that. The big one is Aikido is non-competitive and there shouldn't be any aggression. Again, I teach preemptive stuff in Aikido because actually, why am I going to wait? If I'm going to get into a conflict, and again, I look at that as if I wait for a fight, if I wait for someone to start throwing punches and hit me, at best, I'm going to have to use some more harder blocks that can cause more injury and have to probably use my antennae back to get disruption and get control. So the use of force response becomes higher, or because I've waited for an attack to happen. The worst case scenario is I get my defense wrong when he thumps me and I get knocked down and injured there anyway. So actually, why? If I'm going to go to conflict, if it's within the realms of law, actually, what's wrong with preempting and actually using that preemptive word? I think the way I interpret what extensive is, it's not about starting conflict, but that doesn't mean to say you can't preemptively use force in conflict if the goal is to make sure that the least amount of harm is done at the end of it.
Sure. And a big part of that is reading the intent, because if you think about it, the attack really starts in somebody's mind. It's not the attack that starts in the body that you're concerned about. I mean, you are concerned about it, but you want to preempt, come in and see that decision being made and executing it before the body starts that attack. To me, that's what that Shoto Seizu, control the first move, really is about. It's not attacking somebody who hasn't the intent for violence. It's reading their intent and intercepting them before the physical part actually gets engaged, because there is a bit of a lag.
The conflict has started. The conflict has started, just hasn't manifested yet. That's what you're looking for. You're looking to actually, if you control the person in control of the fight, is a person has a better chance of getting a better outcome. If you're in control, back to the car scenario, that person was in more control of that conflict than I was. He was hence why I had to do what I had to do. If it'd been the other way around, I would have been the person in control. I could have dictated more how the conflict goes, and that's what you're looking for, is that to be the person in control of it.
And this could actually lead us into a whole nother show, and that is because you described it really well. To me, you just described the relationship of Irimi and Tenkan.
Yeah.
Like that it's a 50-50. If you have the ability to intercede, you do it. If you have the ability to take the center line or to move into a superior position, you do it, because you make that other person feel like you did in the car seat of going, I'm kind of behind the 8 ball here. I'm not in a good position to execute an attack. And you can, by doing that, intercept the physical conflict by just merely being in a place where they know they're at a position of disadvantage. I think that's a great, elegant way to avoid the invitation to violence, because once they have an advantage, now you're entirely trusting either they're going to make a benevolent decision not to enact physical violence on you, or you're counting on your ability to negotiate your way out. But if they know they're in an advantage position, even then they can get the impression that you're probably bluffing. I mean, if you're playing poker and somebody's holding 4 aces, they're going to go, I don't care what you got. I'm going to push it because I know I've got an advantage. And it's hard to bluff somebody that's got 4 aces.
Yeah. And again, it's just that. I think you're right. There's a whole other view on how you, And again, it's that good. I think we've been before. Good principles and physicality will transcend Aikido. Yeah, Aikido doesn't have anything in it that other martial arts don't have. We don't hold any magical techniques or powers or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But we have got good principles, and the physicality techniques work. I think and that's go back to what I was trying to do is, can we be in a position to actually apply them? Conor McGregor, great use. If I had him bent over in a Nikkei position and I put a Nikkei on him, he would drop. The physicality of Nikkei, you can't not work.
Right.
It will damage your ligament. It works. There's no doubt around it. If you get someone in that position, they will drop. The reality is I am never going to be able to get a Nikkei onto him because he's too fast, too quick, and all the rest of it. So that's where we need to look at Aikido. We don't have to worry about the techniques not working. We know they work. What we need to make sure is, can we get them into position? Okay, and that for me, let's go back to that. Can you get into a dominant position where I'm off balance, you're off balance, I've got some element of control, Irimi, Tenkan, wherever we've done it, apply the principles, then your Aikido door opens up. But I don't think we pressure test ourselves getting into that position well enough that we could actually then, if you walked into a MMA gym, and sadly we've seen it, and we've seen various people over the years, not perform that well. What they've done is they've walked straight into a high pressure test environment without building up to it. And, we won't mention names. We've all seen the videos where it goes horribly wrong. Actually, what would work was if you build those pressure tests up over time and then walk into that sort of gym, and then, not really steer, but that you probably have a better system of seeing how actually could you,
sure.
Because the techniques exist. You watch MMA, you can see people, Sayanagis, you see people do those sort of techniques. You see people grip and do sanko. You see some of the BJJ, they slide under the gis and they get sankos on and nikkos. All the techniques are there. Everything that we have in Aikido is in MMA. It's in. If you kind of look for will it look like an Aikido technique? No, it won't. But the principle and the physicality of it is there. Mm-hmm. I think that's where people just, we need to marry the two up a little bit at times.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And what I wanted to end on actually from this is the idea, my experience anyway, with firstly, I was taking this in myself as wanting to expand my art, but then I also transpose this into teaching it to my students. We actually had a really fun time doing this. It's easy to think, well, boy, if I get outside the choreography part, it's going to be scary and intimidating, and it's going to be something that is not going to be well received. I found the actual opposite. It builds a level of confidence. It's fun to play around. And really that is it. You're kind of crossing over into playing with your martial art, because the creativity and letting your attacker do whatever they want, it feels more like you're playing. And because you're not going 100% intensity, you're starting, just like you said, at lower levels, but getting more creative, a little bit of resistance here. You're sort of horsing around. I find that when my students start doing this, we start kind of laughing and enjoying ourselves, because the unpredictability, you get over that it's scary. You put that aside and be like, we're in a safe enough place. We can play around. Yeah, we're going to lose. We're going to get into a bad position. You learn by all those things. You learn by failure. You don't learn by success. Yeah. And so, but it's a fun process. And as that confidence builds, I've had students comment, even just on head covers, like, wow, I feel really safe when I know how to do that. I know I'm not going to get hit in the face. That's a huge, empowering feeling, to know that you have a simple motion that you can do that will keep you from getting cranked in the head. And that empowerment, I think, is what martial arts training is built on. Like, that's the bedrock of why we train for that physical conflict, to be confident and not be frightened and not be frozen in fear. We know what we can do. We know it's simple. We know it's direct, and we can convey that. And I can teach somebody who's a white belt that in a week. They'll get better at it as they practice it more, but I can get them that confidence real fast. and integrate it with everything that Aikido does. You know, you want to get close to somebody, make sure you get there without getting hit in the head. Like that's a huge thing. But once you get close, now you have all the manipulations, the Ariminages, everything, Hikitoshis, all the stuff that is right in our wheelhouse, you can get to very safely and with great confidence. And that's a fun
place. But the question back to you as well is also, you're an experienced sensei. You know, if you weren't doing that, where's the development as a sensei? Once you've, I'm a Nidan now. They probably, if you look at the Aikido syllabus, there's nothing on there that I can't do. And what I tend to do, you end up playing around. We've got a grid is from there's like the BA sort of syllabus type thing is, and now I end up playing with, like it said, I can't do this technique from that grab. Well, right. Let me find a way of getting that technique on. So, if you were to do that, how would sensei? Would you? Because you watch high-ranking sensei do demonstrations and stuff. You're a bit like, okay, that's nice, but it's just the same techniques. Sometimes I'm a bit harder, flashy, and all this sort of stuff. So I almost think, actually, do you think that this is, as a development as a sensei, once you've mastered Aikido, once you've actually got a grip, a good understanding of all the techniques, and you can apply it and all that sort of stuff, do you find this is actually helping you keep on your toes and develop yourself as a sensei to keep going on as well?
Yeah, I guess this is where
I'll throw you a question. Yeah,
no, that's a good one. That's a good one. And I guess this is where I start to separate the difference between an instructor and a coach. Where an instructor wants to convey all of the curriculum, they need to students need to know every single technique equally well, which in my mind comes with you can be kind of that jack of all trades and master of none, where you know them all, but you're not really good at any particular set. Versus a coach who will try to get the best out of their student and say, we're going to get you a subset of this curriculum, but you're going to be really good at what you do. And you're going to have some, I call them hip pocket techniques, or some things that you know and trust, and they're always at your fingertips. Because I've got a small enough school, I think a lot of instructors are like this, where, I've got 10 a dozen up to 24 students at times, where I know each one of them. I know their strengths, their personalities, their body types. I will say, here's a technique that's probably going to work for you because of your specific, who you are. Let's work on that part, rather than saying, I'm going to teach you this whole curriculum part. And the thing that I took from your question too is, if you are an instructor and you're used to teaching that curriculum, how do you start to drift towards the coach part, or how do you start to get creative? And I was lucky enough to find some mentors who were able to teach me outside of that, my Aikido realm. And in learning that, I would start to, initially there didn't seem to be much crossover, but the more I studied other things, the more I saw the principles of Aikido in them, whether it was wrestling, kicking, pugilism, all kinds of different things. They looked so different at the time, but they had a lot of crossover. And then there was another thing. If you cannot find a mentor, take a look at what real fights tend to look like. And get an idea, because we've seen what Aikido looks like, especially the demonstration type. It has its own look, but look at surveillance videos, look at real fight type things, and really analyze it like you would analyze Aikido technique, because we're used to watching our instructors. What are their feet doing? What are their hips doing? What's the upper body doing? What is the attack doing? What are the dangers, and what are the nuances? An instructor should be able to see nuances, and then take that vision and look at a street ambush or a bar fight, or see how that plays out. What are the attacks you're seeing? What are the body motions and the threats? How would somebody deal with that? And you can actually start to transpose and say, okay, well, let's recreate that a little bit. Get a senior fellow student, or a fellow student that's got a little bit of experience, say, let's try to recreate this and see what an option would be that we can take from our curriculum that might fit that part. Like, it's all a laboratory. It's like experimenting, including things like close quarters, because that's what you'll often see with real fights. Is it's not in a big open space generally. I mean, yeah, there's some parking lot fights, but it tends to be tables and chairs around, maybe between parked cars, limited space, even playing around with that, just taking your regular Aikido practice and go into a hallway and now practice and see what that looks like.
We've done it successfully back to the wall.
Everything. Yeah.
So Aikido, but start with the back to the wall. So you do nothing different. But when you haven't got space to move, it just makes you have to think differently. So yeah, I fully agree.
And there's a lot of adventuring thing. I mean, you can take your bobs, roll them out on the floor, and now there are people standing around, and or they're posts or furniture, and you can practice. Oh, I've got limited space now. And by starting that exploration, once you do it, it's like this long path that you can travel and enjoy for a long, long time, because there's no real end to it. And as you go along, you probably get to that, okay, well, what if I get tackled? What if I get taken down? What do I do then? It's a great exploration. I've really enjoyed it. My students love it. And there's such growth that happens with it. And I don't feel at any point like I've given up on the soul or spirit of Aikido. Of course, it's what I view it as, and that's a whole nother argument of what is Aikido. And nobody, you get 5 Aikido practitioners and you'll get 10 opinions about what Aikido is. But to me, it's finding an elegant solution to the problem of violence, ending it as quickly as possible, and protecting yourself. That's the ultimate goal. And I find many things fit into that. And I'm not real persnickety about what I steal from other arts that seems to fit well with Aikido's main purpose, which is we are not indulging in violence. We want to end it, and end it very quickly with the minimal amount of damage to ourselves, obviously, but not causing unnecessary harm to other people. Like, to me, that's the criteria. So good question. Way to turn it around.
My interrogation techniques.
I see. You're a clever one, sir. Very clever. Well, I think we should wrap it up, but I want to give you the last word. I want to thank you for coming on the show. And is there anything you wanted to throw out to wrap it up?
No, just a pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to you. We've made good conversations. I just think, if anyone is watching it, think, take those extra steps. Even if you're a very traditional school, you can take these steps, maintain the spirit of traditionality. Even if it's okay, right, we're going to, the attendees obviously, all right, we're going to stick with our very, set attendees, but bring some pads in, bring some contact. You can take these steps and still remain very much within the traditional world and within the spirit of the organisations or the senses of Aikido. You don't have to think, oh my God, my insane, turn it into a combative school that goes all the way down that rabbit hole. You don't have to do that, but take those steps, because you will, like you said, you will enjoy it. It's a fun experience and it's a learning experience, but it's still fun. I think it's great fun when we get stuff, and I end up when my students knock me on my backside, and it's great fun. You learn from that. So don't be scared to take those steps, because I think it's improved my Aikido, and it's improved my ability to think, actually, is there some benefit? Is this going to help me when I need it to? And the answer is yes, it will do. But if you don't find out in the dojo, you won't find out in the real world. That's how I've
it's very empowering, and that's something that I found my students love, and I love it myself. It's true confidence.
Totally.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Martyn. It's been great talking to you, my friend, as always, and we'll hope to talk to you real soon.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Stay tuned for more episodes. I've got some great stuff on the way very soon. In the meantime, enjoy your training.